I move that the House record its deep regret at the death on 14 December 2024 of the Honourable Kevin James Andrews AM, a former Minister and Member for Menzies from 1991 to 2022, place on record its appreciation of his meritorious public service and tender its sympathy to his family in their bereavement.
Prime Minister has the call.
Mr Speaker, it is a measure of the man that we honour today that throughout the wealth of tributes paid to his life by his colleagues, his opponents, his loved ones and his friends, the same three pillars stand tall in all of them: his deep faith, his belief in public service and his devotion to his family. I want to welcome all the members of the Andrews family joining us today. Margie Andrews, who's here on the floor, accompanied by her dear friend Bernadette Hayes. Emily, Juan, Pat, Martin and Marcella in the gallery. For 31 years, this house was Kevin's second home. But everyone who served here with him, everyone who worked with him, indeed virtually anyone who met him, came away knowing how much all of you meant to him. I spoke with Margie after Kevin's passing. I rang her to ensure that the family were aware of the government offering a state funeral as was entirely appropriate. And I must say that the love in this fantastic relationship that they had shone through during that discussion. None of us in public life can serve our country and serve our local community without the sacrifices that our families make. The man that you loved understood everything you gave up to support him, and he was grateful for it every day. Kevin Andrews was someone who did always stand up for his principles and was always courteous and respectful in the manner he advanced them. That did him credit. Some of his principles I disagreed with. But you were able to have a discussion in a courteous way and a respectful way. I must say, Mr Speaker, in a way that you would like to see, I think, all members of the House conduct themselves. It was who he was, and it gave him enormous credit. As a Cabinet Minister, his portfolios took him to the political front lines: immigration, social services, defence, and most notably, the battle over work choices during his time as Employment and Workplace Relations Minister. These were very high-stakes, high-profile roles, and that speaks for the great trust that former Prime Minister Howard and former Prime Minister Abbott, who I spoke with on Kevin's passing, placed in him as a person of integrity and someone who was committed to getting his objectives achieved through this democratic institution, which is so important. This reflects the conviction that Kevin brought to public life, and they also reveal something of the man beyond the arena, because even when he was the standard bearer for policies with which Labor members fiercely disagreed and firmly opposed, Kevin Andrews was regarded by his opponents with true respect and affection. That's not because the arguments that he put forward were an exercise in mere show. It's because he had an instinctive respect for everyone who had answered the call of public service. And he had a rich world of interests and enthusiasms beyond politics, from his famous phantom calls of the Melbourne Cup to all those kilometres he logged on the annual polypedal, raising funds for worthy causes. As former Prime Minister Tony Abbott put it in his moving eulogy he gave at that state funeral in December, There was nothing narrow or politically obsessive about Kevin. It was this breadth of interest, together with his depth of faith, that sustained him right through to the final moments of his life. Just 2 weeks before his passing, he published a history of his local Catholic church. And in the final hours of his life, he was still emailing his publisher about the manuscript of his memoirs. To the last, this was indeed a man determined to fill every page. His life was indeed a very full story indeed. Our condolences to all who loved him. Our condolences to the Liberal Party of Australia, an organisation that he loved and served with loyalty and with distinction. May Kevin Andrews rest in eternal peace.
And on indulgence, the Honourable, the Leader of the Opposition.
Thank you very much, Mr Speaker, and I thank the Prime Minister for very dignified, very warm and generous words. I'm honoured to be here to celebrate the life of Kevin James Andrews AM. It's an extension of what's been a long period of mourning for Margie and the family and all of those who were very close to Kevin. 6 years before he was elected to the Parliament, Kevin Andrews visited Washington DC. The young man stumbled across an old political memorabilia shop. On a narrow, dusty shelf, he chanced upon a copy of John F. Kennedy's inaugural address, signed by the 35th President of the United States. That framed speech would hang on the wall of Kevin's office for his more than 30-year career as the member for Menzies. Kevin lived by Kennedy's immortalised words: "Ask not what your country can do for you, ask what you can do for your country." But there was another, less quoted line of that speech which Kevin adored and embodied. President Kennedy said, "Civility is not a sign of weakness, and sincerity is always subject to proof." No one could ever deny Kevin Andrews' civility or his sincerity. Testimony to that fact was the outpouring of love and respect for Kevin from across the political aisle after his untimely death. Born in Sale in Victoria, Kevin was proud to come from the great middle sector of Australia. His parents weren't wealthy, but they were hard-working, running a trucking business and small farm in Gippsland. They inspired in him the diligence and dedication needed for success. As a racing commentator and sports reporter from his early teens, Kevin developed a love of speaking and writing that would equip him so well for his political life to come. But before that, he would spend a decade in the Victorian legal profession as a barrister, and before that, as the associate to the late, great Sir James Gobbo in the Supreme Court of Victoria. In the civil courts, Kevin witnessed the increasing economic plight of Australians. He wanted to make a difference to clients he helped, and his belief in liberalism as the true source of social justice thrust him into politics. Succeeding Neil Brown at a by-election in 1991, Kevin would go on to win the seat of Menzies a record 10 times. As a backbencher, Kevin quickly revealed himself to be a parliamentarian of profound skill and a man of principle driven by his Catholic faith. He campaigned to repeal a then euthanasia law in the Northern Territory, and indeed the Andrews Bill remains one of the few successful private members' bills. Dignified, decent, determined and duty-driven, Kevin was a dependable minister, including in Cabinet. He delivered for Prime Ministers John Howard and Tony Abbott, regardless of the portfolio he was dealt. In charge of aged care, Kevin increased the number of beds, eased administrative burdens for nursing staff and implemented a pricing review. Taking the reins of workplace relations, Kevin led the establishment of a permanent construction industry watchdog, restoring the rule of law to a lawless sector. At the helm of immigration, Kevin introduced the Citizenship Act and strengthened the character provisions under the Migration Act. He recognised the importance of a shared national identity. Overseeing social services, Kevin reformed welfare payments and helped many Australians move from being on pensions back into the workforce where they were able to. In command of defence, Kevin oversaw the establishment of a single force structure, increased rotational exercises with key partners, authorised the replacement of our naval fleet and committed troops to fight the evil ISIS death cult in Iraq and Syria. Not to be forgotten in the pivotal role Kevin played in opposition, where he committed himself to the necessary discipline of policy review and development. In so doing, he helped forge the Coalition's path out of the wilderness. Returning to the backbench, Kevin continued to make commendable contributions to the nation, most notably in bringing in the Magnitsky sanctions and to improve the NDIS. For a man who saw politics as a vocation, it was fitting that Kevin finished his service as Father of the House. Possessing a profound intellect, Kevin Andrews was a prolific writer. Penning many books as well as many columns for The Spectator and Quadrant, Kevin exhibited that rare talent to traverse many styles and many subjects. His monograph of Joseph Lyons is a touching insight into our most reluctant Prime Minister, as Kevin described him. An avid cyclist, Kevin's passion pours forth from the pages of his book on Italian cycling. No doubt the members for Hume and Canning will recall Margie and Kevin's fondness for karaoke night at Polypedal. But as they say, what happens on Polypedal stays on Polypedal, and Margie would be happy to hear that. A proud Conservative, Kevin's collection of speeches, One People, One Destiny, includes an address from 2014 where he said, and I quote, "Conservatives believe custom and convention are preferred to endless and often needless change in the name of progress. Change should be judged according to the unintended consequences as well as the intended." Kevin's most scholarly piece is his 2012 book, Maybe I Do, a staunch defence of marriage and the family as society's foundational building blocks. What Kevin understood academically, he lived personally, for undoubtedly Kevin's greatest achievements were twofold. His marriage to his dear wife, Margie, a partner where their attributes and abiding affection amplified them both, and their 5 cherished children, Emily, James, Stuart, Catherine and Benjamin. Kevin Andrews believed that a successful society is a compact across generations. Devoted to God, to his family, to his country and to his party, Kevin Andrews never neglected his role in that compact. To echo Tony Abbott's words at Kevin's state funeral, we are indeed much the poorer for his passing, but we are so much richer for his living. Margie, to you, and it's lovely to see you in the company of Bernadette Hayes, your dear friend today. Thank you, Bernadette, for being there. It's fair to say that Margie's an emotional person and she's felt terribly the loss. She's a person who has been by Kevin's side through every major element of their lives together, public and private. And Margie, the pain that you have felt has been felt, of course, by your family, but by those who have long admired you and the relationship that you've had with Kevin. You are a remarkable person and somebody of great achievement in your own right. But together you were a formidable partnership, and together you created an amazing legacy for your family and for this country. And we pay our respects, our deep respects to you and to your family. May God bless Kevin Andrews and may he rest in peace.
And on indulgence, I give the call to the honourable member for Menzies.
Thank you, Speaker. Being the member for Menzies means something. Margie Andrews said that to me 1 week before Kevin died. We were at the Veneto Club in Bulleen. They were celebrating their 51st anniversary. Kevin was with Margie. He was frail but fully present. Margie asked me to be with him as he worked the room one last time. As we moved from table to table, people shared stories. He smiled and he listened. They were happy to see him, and he was happy to be there, as he must have done so many times as their MP. There was a moment, Margie, where it was just us, and I'm grateful I got to tell him this. Kevin, I think of you often, especially in this place, at an adjournment speech, at my desk alone late at night, in the party room nervous to stand, as I walk the long corridors. Everything I do for the first time, he did many times. I want you to know I admire you more than you know. Being the member for Menzies doesn't just mean something because it is named after a giant. It means something because its longest-serving member was a giant, a gentle one. You have heard of Kevin's conviction and courage. But, Speaker, two other markers stand out. The first was his funeral at St Patrick's Cathedral 2 days before Christmas. At the front were his greatest legacy, you, his family. At the conclusion of the Mass, we turned and we followed you down the aisle. And as I walked down the packed cathedral, to the left and right, I saw people from the community of Menzies. Party members, teachers, shopkeepers, volunteers, neighbours and friends. They had turned up en masse to honour the person who had served them for so long. They were grieving, but they were grateful. The mark of the man was the community that he served. Speaker, the second mark I want to take you to is back to the Veneto Club. The band was playing vintage Italian music. They were playing love songs. Margie, you and Kevin went to the dance floor. You held each other and you danced like it was your first date. You didn't see it, Margie, but his face was beaming, his eyes were closed, he was content, and he was gently holding you. The mark of the man was the love of you, his wife. Vale Kevin Andrews, you were a parliamentarian and a patriot, but most of all, you loved and you were loved. May he rest in peace.
And as a mark of respect to the memory of the Honourable Kevin James Andrews, I ask all present to rise in their places. I thank the House.